Niccolo Machiavelli, a life that changed politics forever. Machiavellianism. Today, this word is synonymous with cynicism, treachery, and unscrupulousness. We used to imagine the author of this concept as a villain whispering advice to tyrants. But the real Niccolo Machiavelli wasn't a villain. He was a passionate patriot, a workaholic, and ultimately a deeply disappointed man. His main book, The Sovereign, shocked the world, not because Machiavelli invented evil, but because he was the first to dare to describe political reality without embellishment. Today, we will walk Machiavelli's path from birth to death and see how the turbulent history of Florence and personal tragedies forced him to write the most scandalous book in the history of mankind. Niccolo was born in Florence in 1469. It was the heyday of the Renaissance. The city was awash in art and money. But behind the beautiful facade, there was chaos. Italy was fragmented into warring city-states that were constantly under threat from France and Spain. Niccolo's family was not rich, from the middle class. His father, Bernardo, a lawyer, was a great admirer of antiquity. Little Niccolo grew up reading the books of Roman historians Titus Livius and Cicero. He had read about the greatness of the Roman Republic and the civic virtues, but the reality on the streets of Florence was different. In his youth, he witnessed the rise and fall of Friar Girolamo Savonarola, who established a theocratic dictatorship in the city and later was burned at the stake. Machiavelli learned his first important lesson from this. Moral authority is not enough. As he would later write, all the armed prophets won, but all the unarmed prophets died. Savonarola was an unarmed prophet, and Machiavelli vowed never to be so naive. In 1498, after the fall of Savonarola, the Republic was restored in Florence, and the 29-year-old Machiavelli was appointed secretary of the Second Chancellery. The next 14 years became the golden time of his life. He became a diplomat and an official in charge of foreign policy and defense. He rode horseback all over Europe, negotiating with kings and popes. It was on these trips that he collected material for his future ideas. The most important meeting in his life took place in 1502 with Cesare Borgia, the son of the Pope. Borgia was ambitious and incredibly cruel. Machiavelli saw how Cesare lured his enemies into negotiations and destroyed them in cold blood. Niccolo was shocked by the brutality, but delighted by the efficiency. He saw in Borgia the prototype of a new sovereign, a man who was not bound by ordinary morality in order to achieve a great goal: unification and salvation of the state. Looking at the Borgias, Machiavelli formulated the idea of two forces of history: virtù, personal valor and energy, and fortuna, blind luck. He realized that even a genius can be broken by fate if he is not ready to act decisively and harshly. However, luck turned against Machiavelli himself. In 1512, the Republic fell, and the powerful Medici clan returned to power. It was a disaster for Niccolo. He was immediately fired, and a few months later, he was arrested on false charges of conspiracy. They tortured him with a strapad. They hung him by his arms, twisting his joints. He endured 6 tortures and pleaded not guilty. He was eventually released, but was banned from entering the city. Machiavelli was forced to leave for his small estate in the wilderness. During the day, he led the life of a commoner, playing cards with butchers. But in the evening, everything changed. He wrote to his friend, "At evening fall, I return home and enter my office. I throw off my peasant dress, dusty and dirty, and put on clothes befitting the court and the Czar." It was in this exile in 1513 that he wrote The Sovereign.
This book was a desperate summary. Machiavelli dedicated it to Lorenzo de' Medici,
hoping that the new rulers would appreciate his knowledge and return him to service. He wanted to show them that he knows how power really works. This is where he delivers his toughest maxims. He says that a sovereign must combine the qualities of a lion and a fox. One must be like a fox to be able to circumvent traps, and a lion to scare away wolves. He asks the famous question, which is better, to be loved or feared by the sovereign? And he answers, it is much more reliable to inspire fear than love, because people in general can be said to be ungrateful and fickle. It is important to understand that Machiavelli did not call for evil for the sake of evil. He simply separated personal ethics and political ethics. He believed that the preservation of the state was the highest goal, and for its sake, the ruler must be ready to embark on the path of evil if circumstances required it. Did his message work? Unfortunately, no. The Medici ignored the book. It was only towards the end of his life that Niccolo began receiving small assignments and commissions to write the history of the city. In 1527, there was another uprising in Florence. The Medici were expelled, and the Republic returned. Machiavelli hoped that his experience would be useful now. But the new Republicans rejected him, considering him a suspicious Medici supporter because of his book. His heart couldn't take the blow. In June 1527, Niccolo Machiavelli died at the age of 58, poor and unrecognized. He never saw his books printed. All his life, he tried to save Italy from chaos by offering bitter medicines, but history remembered not his patriotism, but only the recipes of poisons. His biography is the tragedy of a man who saw reality too clearly in an era when everyone else preferred to believe in beautiful illusions. His ideas are still controversial, but one thing remains unchanged. Machiavelli was the first to remove the mask from politics, revealing its true, often frightening face. Niccolo Machiavelli is often called the father of political realism. But what exactly did he bring to world thought? Why are his ideas still being studied in business schools and policy headquarters? To understand this, you need to drop the label of a villain and look into the essence of his logic. Machiavelli's first and most fundamental idea is the gap between what is and what should be. Before Niccolo, all political thinkers, from Plato to medieval theologians, wrote about how an ideal ruler should behave in an ideal world. Machiavelli was the first to declare that it was useless and even dangerous. He wrote, "The distance between how people live and how they should live is so great that anyone who rejects reality for the sake of what is right acts more to his own detriment than for good, since wanting to profess goodness in all cases of life, he will inevitably perish when faced with a multitude of people who are alien to goodness." In doing so, he laid the foundation for real politique, a policy based on facts, power, and interests, rather than abstract morality. The second key idea is the famous "the end justifies the means." Although Machiavelli never uttered this phrase in this form, the whole essence of his work, The Sovereign, is imbued with this idea. He introduced the concept of state necessity. In his opinion, the morality of an ordinary person and the morality of a ruler are two different things. If an ordinary person commits murder, it is a crime. If a ruler executes conspirators to prevent a civil war and the death of thousands, that's valor. Machiavelli insisted, let the sovereign be blamed for his actions as long as the results justify him, and he will always be justified if the results turn out to be good. For him, the highest good was to preserve the integrity and stability of the state, and for this, he allowed the ruler to be cruel, deceitful, and treacherous. The third idea is a metaphor about the lion and the fox. Machiavelli believed that strength alone was not enough, just as cunning alone was not enough. A ruler must be able to change his nature depending on circumstances. He wrote,
Therefore, of all the animals, let the sovereign be like two, a lion and a fox. A lion is afraid of traps, and a fox is afraid of wolves. Therefore, one must be like a fox to be able to circumvent traps, and a lion to scare away wolves. This is a call to flexibility. A good politician, in Machiavelli's understanding, is not someone who is always honest, but someone who knows how to masterfully hide his true intentions and exploit the weaknesses of others. He argued that it is not necessary for a sovereign to possess all the virtues, but it is very important to appear to possess them. The fourth point is the eternal argument about love and fear. Machiavelli gives him a pragmatic and cold answer. He admits that ideally a ruler should be both loved and feared, but since it's difficult to combine it, it's safer to choose fear. Why? Because love is a feeling that people control themselves. They love the sovereign when it suits them and betray him when danger comes. Fear is controlled by the sovereign himself. People love at their own discretion, but they fear at the discretion of the sovereign, he writes. Therefore, for a wise sovereign, it is better to rely on what depends on himself. At the same time, Machiavelli makes an important reservation. It is necessary to inspire fear in such a way that it does not cause hatred. Fear keeps you in check, but hatred leads to rebellion. To avoid hatred, it is enough for the sovereign to not encroach on the property and women of his subjects, because, as Niccolo cynically noted, people would rather forgive the death of their father than the loss of property. Finally, the fifth idea is the interaction of virtù and fortune, valor and fate. Machiavelli did not believe in divine providence governing history. He believed that life is a struggle between a person and circumstances. Fortune, he says, manages only half of our affairs, and she leaves the other half to us. He compared fate to a stormy river, which in high water demolishes everything in its path. But a wise ruler builds dams and dams in quiet times, so that when the river overflows, direct its energy in the right direction. Machiavelli gives advice: I think it's better to be assertive than careful, because fortune is a woman, and to keep her, you need to hit her and push her. This is his anthem to active action. Even if the chances are slim, the leader must try to subdue the chaos of history. Together, these ideas turned Machiavelli into the first anatomical political scientist. He dissected power the way doctors of that time began to dissect human bodies, without squeamishness, in order to understand how this mechanism actually works. And although his methods may seem cruel to us, his honesty in front of reality made the world think about how society really works.